Now we're going to talk to David Sirota. He's author of Hostile Takeover, of course, and he's written in his syndicated column, We're the Real Deficit Hawks. David, welcome back to the Young Turks.
Hey, thanks for having me.
First, today the Senate announced their version of the health care reform bill, Harry Reid did, and every single article says that it will cost us $848 billion. And they say the House's version will cost us $1 trillion. Can you tell us why that is, to say the least, misleading?
Well, because it's like saying that if I buy some stock for $1,000 and I make $1,100 on my investment, that the investment cost me $1,000. Well, it's technically true the investment cost me $1,000, but I made $100. This Congressional Budget Office report for both the House and Senate bill says that these bills cost about somewhere between $800 and $900 billion. That's the outlay, that's the investment. But that through its tax changes and through its budget cuts to private insurance subsidies through Medicare, it will recover far more than it spends. The House bill will recover about $11 billion a year in total. So at the end of 10 years, the House and Senate bills will recover somewhere between $100 and $200 billion. So at the end of 10 years, the deficit based on just the impact of the health care bill will be about $100 to $200 billion less. So that's the real story. That's the real cost of these bills. The cost of these bills is that taxpayers ultimately will make back more than they invest.
So let's get this straight. When in the House version, at the end of 10 years, we're saving $111 billion. And in the Senate version, at the end of 10 years, we're saving $130 billion. Now, how about other programs where, for example, as you point out in your column, defense? Do we save any money back, or are we just doing outlays then?
No, it's just outlays. Now, you could argue that when you spend money on defense, it's akin to some form of stimulus spending, right? It's like, you spend money and that theoretically creates jobs and that theoretically creates tax revenues. But just on a straight-up budgetary basis, the way, comparing apples to apples, the way the Congressional Budget Office scores the health care bill, because you could make the same argument with health care, that a health care expenditure is going to create jobs. So if you want to compare apples to apples, what goes out in a bill versus what comes in a bill, the health care bills propose spending $800 to $900 billion, and their tax and budget cutting changes would recover about $900 billion to $1 trillion, with a net gain of $100 billion to $200 billion at the end of the day. Defense bills, the one-year defense bill would spend $636 billion in 1 year, so over 10 years, that's almost $7 trillion over 10 years, and there are no tax or budget-cutting provisions in those bills. So apples to apples, you're talking about either saving $200 billion on health care and or spending, reduce or increasing the deficit by $7 trillion with the defense bill.
So the reason you point that out is because whether it's conservative Republicans or conservative Democrats, whenever they say they're concerned about the deficit, they mention health care, which actually reduces the deficit, which makes no damn sense at all, but they never mention defense spending. So Lieberman, for example, loves spending more money in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that money never gets back to us, and he never mentions the deficit there. Is that roughly right?
That's exactly what's going on. And I've got some modicum of respect for people who are at least ideologically consistent. I don't agree necessarily with people like Ron Paul on everything, but at least he's a guy who says, look, I don't support health care spending, and I'm willing to vote against really wasteful defense programs and even sometimes the defense bill. The problem, as you said, is that there's a hypocrisy here. Is that and I've called it before, it's selective deficit disorder. Deficits only matter when the government is spending on middle-class priorities. But when the government is spending on defense contractors or tax loopholes or corporate tax subsidies, suddenly the same people who say they care about or are worried about deficits aren't worried at all.
So David's written the books, The Uprising and Hostile Takeover. You know, it's something interesting's happening here, David. That populist uprising that you predicted, I see it. And it's interesting because I see it on the left-wing side. I also see it on the right-wing side. They just are misdirected. They don't. They're angry, but they don't know what to be angry about, so they get tricked by the Becks and the Hannitys of the world. But how long can they keep this up, where, you know, the guys who are pretending to be conservative are actually corporatists, and they're doing the bidding of the lobbyists who pay them their money while pretending to take advantage of the right-wing populism? How long can they keep it up before the gig is up?
Well, I think they can keep it up for as long as the Democrats allow them to keep it up. I mean, the more the contrast is drawn, I think the better. That's why I think ultimately the health care debate will be good for Democrats, because I think that the Republicans will dig in and they will oppose health care. And I think what we're seeing, it's not perfect, but it's certainly better than the status quo. And the Democrats will be able to draw, if they continue to fight in the right way, they'll be able to draw this precise contrast. Now, I think,
but they don't. That's the problem. They don't.
Yeah, yes, that is certainly the problem. I mean, I think, look, we saw an announcement today. Harry Reid said he's not going to consider passing the health care bill with just 51 votes through the reconciliation process. So you're right. Look, the Democrats, and let's be fair, you know, there are some Democrats who are part of this problem. The blue dogs in the House, for instance, who voted against health care, these are guys who are knee-jerk yes votes for the most bloated defense spending bills in our country's history. Remember, and this is a shocking statistic, it was National Journal 2 months ago that reported that the Democrats in Congress and President Obama are on track in the first term here of the Obama administration to spend more in a single presidential term than any single presidential term has spent on defense since World War II.
And, you know, they cut some programs, the helicopter for the president, et cetera, but not nearly enough. And they actually have some help from John McCain, and they should use it to go further. But, of course, that has a political price, and they don't want to pay that political price. Now, finally, David, I think the real problem here is the media. Because the media keeps saying, oh, the bill costs $848 billion. It costs $1 trillion. It costs. Oh, when Lieberman says, oh, it's he's concerned about the deficit, they treat it as if it's a legitimate point. So we come back to that. You know, I'm tired of asking it, but we got to ask it. We got to keep insisting on it. What is it? I mean, does the media know this and they don't want to tell the American people, or they're just so damn thick-headed that they can't understand these simple concepts?
No, I think the media understands these concepts. These reporters who cover budget matters understand this. I think that what it is that the media understands what is going to be a headline that is waved around and what isn't. They understand the existing political dynamic, which is that, unfortunately, it's not controversial to pass a $636 billion deficit-expanding, waste-ridden Pentagon budget bill, but it is controversial to try to pass an $80 billion a year, because that's what it is, $800 billion over 10 years, $80 billion a year health care bill. So you get, you know, these little teeny stories, if at all, about these defense bills, and you get the health care bills whose headlines stress the point that is going to be most inflammatory. Remember, it's not technically wrong to say that the health care bill will require an outlay of $800 billion. It is, but it is dishonest and misleading to say that without saying that over 10 years that it will actually save money. And that's what the media does, because it wants to sensationalize things.
David Sirota, the author of The Uprising and Hostile Takeover. Thank you for joining us, man. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Jay.
And the syndicated column by David is excellent. You should check it out. And he's been calling it right for a long time.
If you like this little clip, you'll love the whole show. It loops 24/7 on theyoungturks.com. Go and check it out right now.